FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
FSN is now sponsored by Health IQ, which is an insurance company that helps health-conscious people like you get lower rates on your life insurance.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next.
Welcome, and you are listening to the Financial Survival Network. It's the last day of February 2018, and, well, this month, this was an interesting month. I think they're all interesting when it's your job to actually look at them, but we had some interesting movements in trade. Looks like NAFTA could very well be going down the tubes. That could be good, that could be bad, depending upon whom you speak with. Hey, President Trump imposed protective tariffs on solar cells, and well, there's a lot more going on in trade, which we will talk about further. But as always, join the show, participate, be part of the action here. We do answer everything. And just email kl@kerrylutz.com. So what about trade? Well, our good friend Jeff Ferry, Research Director of Coalition for a Prosperous America, is here with us now. Jeff, welcome back to the show.
Hi, Kerry. Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Starting out with trade, Trump stepped up to the plate, imposed protective tariffs on Chinese solar panels. However, what I heard was that the Chinese had been dumping them for 11 months before, whether they knew he was going to impose them or they just had a lot to dump. Is this going to help or not?
Yes, I think this is the right thing to do for the solar industry, and I think it is going to help. And we've already spoken to a number of solar manufacturing companies who say they are increasing production here in the United States. So that's great news for the solar industry, great news for the American worker, and great news for the economy.
Well, I see from your bio, Jeff, your father worked in the printing industry in New York and a lifelong member of the Amalgamated Lithographers of America. Didn't the unions help destroy the printing industry in New York? And haven't they destroyed many other industries around the country?
Wow. Okay, so that's a good question. My view on that is that, like medicine, a certain amount of medicine is good for you. You take too much, it'll kill you. There's no question that in certain industries, the unions in this country got too powerful and they hurt the industry. My poor dad died in 1976. And I don't think anybody ever accused him of making too much money and damaging the U.S. print industry. What he actually said to me back in the 1970s when I was in high school, he said, Jeff, my job is going to move to Florida one day. So one day our family's either going to move to Florida or I'm going to stop working in the print industry. Now, at the time, that just seemed like a tragedy to a teenage boy. And then a worse tragedy happened. He died of a heart attack. And he never had to move to Florida. But
that could be a plus. I happen to live here, but you know what I'm saying. And I didn't mean to nail you on that question.
But now I'm an economist, and you have these forces at work. It was cheaper to employ printers in Florida and the South, and so the printing industry moved down there to a large extent. New York City was always an expensive place to do anything. Is the main source of the problem. The unions were part of the problem. The unions should have been more progressive. But, when you look at the state of the U.S. economy today, you've got to say what we've seen in the last 20 years is a weakening of union. Well, really, since Ronald Reagan, we've seen a weakening in union power. But in the last 20 years, we've seen a collapse in economic growth for the average American family. So these things are all related. Is the solution to make the union stronger? No, I don't think so. I think the solution is to take a more proactive approach towards our international trade, because it's competition from overseas that has weakened the unions and weakened wages for the average American worker. And if you made made the union stronger, then more work would just go overseas. So you mentioned NAFTA's in danger of collapse. I think, frankly, that's a good thing, because we can't ask American workers and American car companies to compete with Mexican labor, not when Mexican labor is only earning $2 an hour, $2.50 an hour. That's not a future for the United States of America. So I guess my answer is unions have caused many problems for many industries over the last 50 years, but they are not the number one problem today. And we have the AFL-CIO as a member of the Coalition for a Prosperous America, and I find our man from the AFL-CIO a very reasonable guy. He's not demanding outrageous wage increases. He's demanding that we make changes to NAFTA and changes to our relationships with Asian countries, and he and I agree on that.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to ambush you on that question, but really there's a deeper issue that many free traders point to, and it's that, hey, when you start doing tariffs, start doing protecting American industry quotas, a lot of times you're perpetuating very inefficient practices, not just labor practices, but bad management. You're rewarding bad management for being bad. Isn't that true at least some of the time?
I think that's a very good issue you raise. And yes, you're right. It's some of the time it is true. That is a danger you run. But again, let's look at the bigger picture. In the bigger picture of things, Chinese government is spending billions of dollars supporting its solar panel industry, its steel industry, its aluminum industry, and a dozen other industries. We are not losing market share because of bad management as a general proposition. We are losing market share because the Chinese government is prepared to spend billions to take over and dominate those markets. We have to decide on the appropriate response.
Yeah, so
so management's an issue, and you can take individual industries in the U.S., and I'm quite happy to talk to you about my view of the management of those industries. But the global issue here is the United States. It claims it believes in free trade. Well, put it this way: the Chinese claim they believe in free trade, but what they're really practicing is nothing like free trade. It is government-supported domination of global industry.
Yeah, it's really mercantilism, and I totally agree with you.
Exactly.
That we can't allow other countries, like President Trump says, to treat us like chumps and suckers and just take all of their stuff when they boycott ours, when they impose unfair, maybe non-tariff trade barriers, and when they just say, we'll just make it at home. It's got to be reciprocal. It's got to be fair on both sides, because I think what the Chinese fail to realize, and the Mexicans and the Canadians, is that it needs to be win-win. You can't just be the whipping boy of the entire world and expect the economy to keep growing and expect standards of living to go up, which they've gone down in the past 30 years for the middle class.
That's absolutely right. We've got ourselves a lot of people in this country, not President Trump, but a lot of people who dominated decision-making and policy-making in Washington up until last year, got themselves into the view that all that matters in America is to consume, consume, consume. And we've become the consumer of last resort for all these countries like China that want to overproduce, and they sell goods here. And that's fine. We're consuming a lot of things and we're running up debt. It's not fine in the long run, but in the short run, people think it's good. But what they don't seem to pay enough attention to is that by not focusing on the production side, we're losing jobs, we're losing positions in industries which are A, strategic for national security, and B, pay well today and have a long-term growth path. I mean, steel is an industry that increases productivity every single year. And, sure, there are fewer steel workers than there were 30 years ago, but those steel workers are pretty well paid. And that's a crucial industry for us. And we need to focus on that and not just say, oh, aren't we lucky the Chinese want to sell us steel at below cost? Because, that's a sucker's path.
Yeah, for sure. It looks profitable in the short run. In the long run, it's not. Hey, what was your feeling about Peter Navarro getting promoted into the higher up into the U.S. Trade Negotiation Group, assistant to the president?
The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
FSN is now sponsored by Health IQ, which is an insurance company that helps health-conscious people like you get lower rates on your life insurance. You probably didn't know that people with a high health IQ are 42% less likely to be obese and have a 50% lower hospitalization rate than those with a low health IQ. Living an overall healthy lifestyle can lower your risk of cardiovascular disease and all causes of mortality by 57 to 60%. Physically active people such as myself, I bike ride, try to do 30, 40 miles a week, and I feel great, and I'm lowering my risk of heart disease by over half, as well as reducing the risk of cancer by 22% over those of you who are inactive. So if you're health conscious and want to save on your life insurance, go to healthiq.com/FSN. You heard it, healthiq.com/FSN. See if you qualify and start saving today.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next.
Absolutely thrilled. Peter's a good guy. Peter has recognized for a long time that China is not a partner and that, we are not all happy campers in a little Disney movie here. They are a competitor and a rival. So Peter he's now got a direct line to President Trump from what I understand. He's no longer part of a team that was run by a Wall Street free trader named Gary Cohn. We think that's an absolutely fantastic move. And, incidentally, the other big personnel shift worth noting this week is that President Xi of China has asked the Communist Party to change the rules so he is no longer limited to 2 terms. So we're now looking at a man who's going to be essentially the dictator in China for the rest of his life. I mean, this is the next Mao Zedong. But the difference is Mao Zedong really believed in communism and made a mess of the Chinese economy, not to mention the millions of people who died from famine and all the rest of it. President Xi believes in capitalism, although he calls it communism, and he's set to run that country for life. And I think that's a scary thing. And I think, things are going our way in Washington. More and more people are recognizing, hey, the Pollyanna view that prevailed 5 or 10 years ago, that, like I said, every nation are friends and let's all march together down the yellow brick road. More and more people in Washington are recognizing that that's a cartoon. And the reality is we've got a serious rival over there in Beijing.
That's a great point. And, it looks like the globalists led by Gary Cohn in the White House have lost, judging from what's happening. I mean, obviously, Trump has not marched in and just imposed trade sanctions here and there. They seem to be much more strategic.
Yes, I think you're absolutely right. I think that, I wouldn't be so categorical that the globalists have lost. The globalists have got a lot of powerful people in the White House, although you see Jared Kushner is having his problems now. But I think last year, President Trump was very concerned with tax reform. That happened. That got through. He believes that's going to help him in the midterm elections. This year now he's turning to trade because he realizes that the base, the worker, the ordinary American employee gets more out of a better trade position than he does out of tax reform, because tax reform was mostly corporate, not mostly individual. So now the president's focused on trade. We've seen solar panels. He's got to make a steel and aluminum decision in April. Even bigger than that is the intellectual property case, which is directly focused at China, because if there's anybody guilty of forced technology transfer, it is the Chinese government and Chinese companies. So I see a lot of positive actions on trade coming down the pike this year.
And that is a great point. Look, the people who put him into office put him over the top. Michigan, Wisconsin, Illinois, Ohio, Iowa, Pennsylvania. And those states have been devastated by free trade. So the combination of the tax cut and of really going after trade bigly, as he would say, it's going to virtually cement the Rust Belt as a red bloc now, red voting bloc.
I think you're absolutely right, and I think Trump is a shrewd politician, and he watches all these things like the Me Too movement and guns and all these things people get very angry about, and they take sides, and he tweets, and maybe he makes as many enemies as friends when he tweets sometimes. But when people go to the voting booth, what do they care about? What do they think the politicians can influence? The politicians can influence the state of the economy and the state of our trade relations. They can't really influence a lot of the other issues that people get so emotional about. How men and women treat each other in Hollywood. We don't look, or at least I don't look to our politicians to set good practice between men and women. I try and do that personally in my daily life. What I look to the folks in Washington to do is, look, you control relations with China and Mexico and other countries. Please improve that, because that will improve the job situation on the ground.
Hey, so
in the kitchen.
Couple things. NAFTA, Mexico, Canada. So I just read recently $28 billion a year is siphoned out of the country for remittances. And if you don't know what a remittance is when you're in a foreign country and you send money back to your country, like, because you're earning money in that country, that's a trade imbalance. In addition, it looks like the Canadians and the Mexicans have pretty much come to the conclusion that NAFTA is history. What are they going to do then? Because they are our two largest trading partners. At least Canada's our largest. We're Canada's largest, and we're definitely Mexico's largest, but I think they're our ninth largest trading partner. Are they biting off their noses to spite their faces?
I think they're in trouble. I mean, they have no alternative but to do business with us. And we set the pattern. We're some 85% of GDP of these three countries. So as you say, we dominate trade for each of those two countries, and they are important to us, but much less important than we are to them. So we're in the driving seat, and we need to act that way. And the two situations are very different. Our trade deficit with Canada is pretty small. Our trade deficit with Mexico is very large. It's around $70 billion. That's large relative to the size of the Mexican economy. And the effects of that trade deficit are large in terms of how they impact our car industry and our machinery industry and our apparel industry. And we need to take some action to get those industries back onto a healthy footing, because they cannot compete with a Mexican industry that pays people a tenth of what we pay people, and that seems unwilling to change their system. And so, what's been happening now is we've had to adapt to that unfair competition. We need to change that. They either need to adapt to our needs, or we need to begin tightening the spigot so they don't influence us as much. And the U.S. Trade Rep, Robert Lighthizer, has got some good proposals on the table to improve that relationship. I mean, let me emphasize, it's not going to be turned off overnight. It's not like we're going to stop trading with Mexico. I mean, we're still going to trade with Mexico. We need their avocados. No question, we should be buying their avocados because our consumers want them.
Absolutely.
On the other hand, what we need to do is to change things so, our avocado farmers can do a little better and start to rebuild that industry. Same with everything from tomatoes to cars. And when you get to cars, then you get back to asking about the industrial Midwest. And if we can improve the situation for those heavy industries by reducing the trade flow with Mexico, that's a good way to go.
And let's not forget here, Jeff, that Mexico has become like this conduit for Chinese goods, especially in the auto industry, to be, backdoor exported to the U.S., and the U.S. insisting on higher local content, meaning that X percentage, 70% of parts going into cars have to be from, actually manufactured in the NAFTA countries in order to qualify. Has kind of put the kibosh on the Mexican economy, hasn't it?
It absolutely is going to have a very significant impact. And you're absolutely right. Chinese transshipment continues to be a big problem, especially through countries like Mexico, which don't have as efficient controls as we have. So when we change the rules of local content, the rules of origin, which is a proposal on the table, that's going to help significantly. However, you have to be aware that it's easier to alter the origin of a product coming through Mexican customs than it is through U.S. customs. I mean, we're sometimes naive in that we assume automatically all the gentlemen who get together in a nice conference room in a hotel in Mexico City assume that everybody operates a legal system like we operate. And ours isn't perfect, but it's a lot better than a lot of other countries. So this will continue to be a problem.
You know, I remember my parents telling me a story prior to World War II. There was an embargo on Japanese manufactured goods, and they went and they renamed a city in Japan. They called it USA, USA. And then all the products said made in USA. I mean, I don't know if that was apocryphal or not. I've never read the story again, but it sounds typical. I could see Mexico doing that.
Yeah, that absolutely. Or you could see some Chinese people coming up with that sort of scheme and flying into Mexico and advising the Mexicans on how to do it, and they would do it. Yes. Yeah, that's a good story.
So interesting times ahead as far as trade's concerned. Where do you think we're going to be in another year, Jeff?
That's a good question. I think we're going to see good economic growth this year, driven partly by the tax reform. I think these trade actions and things like steel are going to be very significant, and they're really going to give a boost to the industrial Midwest. So I think I'm optimistic. I think we're going to have a good year economically. But it's going to take many years to recover all the ground we've lost over the last 20. But I have to say I'm optimistic about where we are right now in February of this year. Yeah,
I kind of feel the same way. I see that the jobs are going up in the Midwest. That's where Trump's primary base of support is. Let's face it, the South and the Midwest, the Rust Belt. I find it really interesting, this team that he's assembled. The one that surprises me the most is Mnuchin. I didn't expect him to be such a pronounced advocate for America First, and he's really surprised us.
Yes, I think you're right about Mnuchin, and I think there's a lot of shift and change and transition in the White House, and that will continue to be the case. That's a good issue to raise, because I think what we're dealing with is a guy who ran a real estate empire with as a family business, and I think he's still learning how to appoint literally hundreds of people and manage the whole machine without it being taken over by the globalists or whatever other faction. And I think that's what he learned. I think he had some learning. He was on a learning curve last year, and that's still playing out.
Well, you know what they say, personnel is policy. So,
yeah,
for certain
absolutely
here.
Right.
Well, let's see what happens in the coming year here, Jeff. I appreciate your coming on. Just tell us where we find you again, where we read your articles.
Sure. We are the Coalition for a Prosperous America. We're a group of manufacturing companies, labor unions, farmers and ranchers, all united to improve the U.S. trade position and rebuild domestic manufacturing. We are at prosperousamerica.org, and you can go there and click on research and read the articles I write regularly, and many articles written by many colleagues, some of them distinguished business executives and economists, and we're all following the trade issue, and we'd love you to visit our website and join us and support us.
All right. Hey, and you got a question for Jeff, myself? Be part of the show. Email me at kl@kerrylutz.com or use the Twitter feed at Kerry Lutz. The Facebook page is Financial Survival Network. Thank you so much, Jeff. Always a pleasure to speak with you.
Same here, Kerry. Take care. Have a good March, and we'll speak soon.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.